Okay, welcome back to Club Talk here. Another heavy weekend of hurling gone by. Myself and Michael Verney here, brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get 15% off these jerseys, like for example this retro Clare one or the retro Derry one that Michael Verney is wearing, go to orgaretro.com, use the reference code RGame and you get 15% off the jerseys. Michael Verney, as I said already, a host of games up and down the country, but no better place to start than in Clare, where there was a big shock with O'Callaghan Mills knocking out 2016 and 2018 champions Ballyea. They were a couple of points ahead late on, were Ballyea, 2 points ahead going into injury time. And I think a bit of a burst of 1-2 for O'Callaghan's Mill in injury times, bit of a mistake from the goalkeeper. And that's Ballyea gone. You've got O'Callaghan's Mill back in the final for the first time in 27 years and haven't actually won it since World War II, 1937.
Jenny Mac, yeah, we kind of flagged up the Gary Brennan injury and the effects that it might have on Ballyea, and just reading down through reports and if listened to a few radio accounts of the match yesterday, by all accounts they were just too reliant on Tony Kelly and Niall Deasy, whereas Gary Brennan just is such an effective foil, be it under puckouts, be it running off the shoulder, and he was brilliant in their quarter-final win, hit 4 points, but by all accounts I think they were too reliant on the other two guys up front. And fair play to O'Callaghan's Mills, you know. As you said, haven't won it since 1937, which is just mad. Came with a big finish. And I think 2013 All-Ireland winning captain Pat Donlan put the finishing touches on it when firing over an insurance point to put them 3 up. Big win for them. I think Ballyea would have been just trying to get over this game and try and get Gary Brennan back for the final, for a shot at 6 Mile Bridge, and it just fell short. We heard them a couple of weeks ago. They were a good side, but they were missing him even that day, and they obviously missed him at the weekend again.
Yeah, and actually, just to clarify, World War II started in 1939, I think. So
yeah, I was wondering. I thought your history was gone out the window, so I just said I'd mention 1937 there just in case.
But the wheels were in motion for World War II to start now. Do I have you there now? Huh?
Yeah, you have me there, just about.
I have you there, okay. So that's in one semi-final. That's O'Callaghan's Mills through, and they'll be absolute outsiders against 6 Mile Bridge, you'd imagine. But it's not like 6 Mile Bridge are blowing teams away. Yes, they're getting through, and they always had Broadford at arm's length in the quarter-final. Beat Aero Guinness 17 points to 113 here. So it's not like they beat them out the gap. And Aero were up by 4 points, I think, at half-time, 198 points. Probably a bit frustrated that they weren't even further ahead. And then in a tight game like that, when you consider that Éire Óg haven't been in a final for something like 20 years, you're probably going to expect the team that's been winning county titles recently to come through.
Yeah, we flagged it up on the previous show how tight these games have been in recent years, and again it was really tight again. Éire Óg couldn't have been in a better position. We talked about 6 Mile Bridge have been able to get 2 or 3 ahead in games and just keep teams at arm's length, whereas this was a little bit different. Éire Óg they were 3 points to 0 up, and then they were 198 points up. But there was obviously a shutout in the second half, and the Bridge just got into the game and were able to shut them out. Outscored them 9 points to 4 in the second half. 4 points for a team with Danny Russell, with David Reedy, Shane O'Donnell. Like that's just it's not enough at all. And I'd love to hear a bit more detail on it. But by all accounts, 6 Mile Bridge were able to get a lot of ball up, win an awful lot of frees. I think Alex Murray put over an awful lot of frees, and it was kind of the same as I watched the Broadford game, and I just thought Broadford aren't a bad side, but 6 Mile Bridge just had a bit more guile and a bit more kind of nous, and were just a bit cuter. And by all accounts, from what we're hearing, the Bridge were just a bit cuter again. They have that muscle memory of being in finals and winning tight games, and they were able to do so again. And sets up an interesting final now, because we talked about was Davy versus Shane O'Donnell last week, so it's going to be Davy versus Pat Donlan, the man who he instilled with captaincy in 2013, and the man who ultimately brought them to the summit. But 6 Mile Bridge are not a spectacular side by any means, but they have an unbelievable knack of just getting it done.
Yeah, and a quick word for Derek Fahey. He saved the penalty from Danny Russell. Also, Alex Murray, you mentioned the frees. He scored 10 of them, I think 5 in either half. So that's, I suppose, persistent fouling to some degree being punished by 6 Mile Bridge. And when you've got a forward line and midfield area that includes Shane Golden, Cathal Malone, Jamie Shanahan, and obviously Alex Murray further up the field, Shane Murray probably in the half back line, you're a pretty decent, well-rounded team. So we'll jump on to the Limerick Championship. The semi-finals were on at the weekend also. And I think you'd have to put it down as a fairly big surprise that Doon beat Kilmallock 220 to 117. Richie English, he's out for the year with a cruciate, as we know. Darragh O'Donovan, he was injured in the quarter-final against South Liberties the week before. That's a huge loss. And like we talked, that Richie English would play centre-back, and then Darragh O'Donovan was slotting in at centre-back to rejig the pieces. I wonder how much is down to the fact that Doon have an awful lot of under-21 quality coming through, having won back-to-back there at that level. But like 7 points from Pat Ryan, 2 goals from Jack Ryan, season through against a Kilmallock team that beat Na Piarsaigh pretty well on TV and looked really impressive just a few weeks earlier.
Yeah, I don't think he could have predicted this now. We played Doon with Burr a couple of weeks ago, and they were a good side, a well organised side. But Darragh O'Donovan was kind of like the drill sergeant at centre back, and he was orchestrating everything and spraying ball all around and keeping their defence pretty tight. And when you look at it, they'd probably moved him from midfield back to centre back when Richie English was out. And then it caused another kind of a ripple effect when Darragh O'Donovan is out. So they're basically missing their two like really all-star kind of candidates, all-star type players in Richie English and Darragh O'Donovan, and they're still able to pull out a result. And it's not even just pulling out a result, it was a convincing enough win over a star-studded Kilmallock side with the likes of Gavin O'Mahony, Graham Mulcahy, that we'd all know pretty well. Massive performance from them. I definitely didn't see it coming. I knew they had plenty of talent, but I just thought Kilmallock looked like they were really coming with a good run again this year, but dumped out in pretty convincing fashion. And it was a fairly convincing win on the other side as well. Like, we kind of flagged it up that a lot was to do with whether Aaron Gillan would be playing or not. He did play, Keane Lynch played as well, and Dermot Burns did too. But Na Piarsaigh, convincing winners, 125 to 17 points. Yeah,
4th successive final for Na Piarsaigh, and it's a repeat of the 2018 decider which Na Piarsaigh went through on. Looking to win a 6th title since 2011, which is very impressive. And a lot of that came from scoring I think the last 7 points here to win by 11. And you can't ignore the fact that Patrick Swell lost cornerback Shawnee O'Brien for a second yellow card just before half time. And a team like Na Piarsaigh, I mean, Kieran Birmingham will obviously be very happy to get them back into a final after the start to the season they had against Kilmallock, losing there, and the fact that they were probably a little bit unimpressive last year. But they have quality players all over the field, and a team like that should be able to punish you if you have an extra man. David Dempsey got the goal. Kevin Downs had actually gone off with a hand injury, so it'll be interesting to see if he's back. So they're in great shape now to win this county final. They'll be massive favourites now after such a poor start to the season with that loss to Kilmallock.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that earlier, losing the first game. Like, it's the right time to lose. If you lose a knockout game, you're gone. At least they lost and had a chance to, like, remember Shane Dowling said, and we've talked about it, he said about a lack of hunger, which was a bit hard to believe in many ways, how you could not have hunger for a first round championship match, having sat in the sidelines for about 3 months. But I'd say they got fair dressing down after that. And like, with a group like that has as much talent as they have, it's just a matter of getting them between the tracks again. They'd obviously just veered off a small bit. Just a matter of getting them between the tracks again. With the Caseys and Kevin Downs, and even though Shane Dowling's injured, but I'm sure he's influential in the back room and having some kind of say in things and kind of even motivating fellas. There's so much talent around the place with Will O'Donoghue as well. They've got them back on the right road again. They're going to be hard beaten in the final. But from Doon's point of view, when you've beaten Kilmallock without one of your star players, and there's the chance for him to be back the next day, they'll be confident going in. And it's not the Doon team that went into the 2018 final inexperienced and probably raw and were blown away a bit. It's a Doon side now that have overcome a lot of obstacles. They've won a county semi-final with a lot of young players on show and without their 2 best players. So they'll be coming in full of confidence, and I think it'll be an interesting final, and I think it's one that could go. It could go either way. I don't think it's as clear cut. And Piarsaigh will be heavy favourites, but a result like that could do wonders for Doon.
Yeah, and from the Piarsaigh point of view, if they were to go and win the county title after losing arguably their best player in Shane Dowling, or their best player of the decade at least in Shane Dowling, that would be incredibly impressive. It
just shows you the strength and depth that both panels have, obviously. Like, Shane Dowling's missing on one side, Richie English and Darragh O'Donovan are missing on the other side, and they're still both able to win county semi-finals by 6 and 11 points respectively. It's outstanding, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Piarsaigh aren't far in terms of their forward line off an inter-county team, or I mean, like David Dempsey, Kevin Downs we've mentioned, Adrian Breen, so on and so forth. Peter Casey, there's so much quality there. Also, just a word on Kildimo Palace Kenry. Jerome O'Connell from the Limerick Leader was tweeting that they're back in senior hurling for the first time since the 1940s. They beat Mungret 22 points to 113 in the Premier Intermediate Hurling Championship final. Level 8 times before winning, I think scoring 9 out of the last, they scored 9 out of the last 11 just to push on. So Kyle Hayes has them back up in senior level. We'll move on to the Kilkenny Championship because there was a couple of the semi-finals that were on TV over the weekend. Dixborough saw off O'Loughlin Gales 216 to 14 points. We're always kind of in charge here. And my own namesake Shane Stapleton from St. Pat's Palmerstown, who transferred down to Dixborough a few years ago, he scored 110 on a lot of ball, hitting the sidelines, lovely. And actually,
the only time your name will ever be in headlights. I'd say you're bullying that even that Dixborough couldn't possibly go on a provincial run, because it's the only time your name will be in the headlights.
It was funny. One of the lads, one of the cooler lads, Nisha Waldron, who's from Kilkenny, he got a text saying, "Geez, I see Shane Stapleton's doing a load of scoring, is that your lad?" And he goes, "No, that's Shane Stapleton the hurler, not our Shane Stapleton." So I was getting slated good at training yesterday by virtue of doing nothing, having the same name as a lad. But yeah, they were very impressive. And that goal that Aidan Nolan scored in the second half, or when he was cutting in from the sideline, faked the shot past Paddy Deegan, who tried to hook him from behind, turned back in and finished lovely. That was really, really impressive. And then Shane Stapleton, a solo and off the stick from, he must have been 18 yards out, just buried it into the corner. They were really, really impressive. O'Loughlin's are probably going to be pretty disappointed in that performance. They kind of just, as the second half wore on, it was pretty obvious who was going to be in charge here. Then the other...
They crumbled a bit in the second half. O'Loughlin's did. For a lot of the talent that they have, I would have been expecting a lot more in the second half. But we did probably flag it up that the Borough had that sort of a bench that could really turn a game. Like if you're looking at like Martin Gaffney, Oisin Goff, Nick Fagan, they were all on the county final winning team a couple of years ago, as was Conor Downey, and none of them are starting. They're all coming into games and having a massive impact. Like Conor Downey is a classic example. He's the captain, right? And a lot of people in Kilkenny circles would think that he's good enough to be on the Kilkenny panel. He got injured earlier on this year and he hasn't got his place back, and that just highlights how good their panel is. They've an outstanding panel. I think Aidan Nolan deserves another mention as well. He's looking to do a Shamie Callan. If he gets a goal in the final, he'd have scored a goal in every game they've played. I think it's 6 so far. But he is an injury doubt going into the final because he limped off near the end. But I don't think it looked too serious, so I'd imagine he'd be back. But Dixborough will fancy themselves. Like everybody's gonna probably be tipping Ballyea going into the final because of their pedigree, particularly in recent years, and the fact that they're going for 3 in a row and potentially would have been going for 3 All-Irelands in a row. But Dixborough have been ticking away really, really well. Killian Buckley flying it still, Ollie Walsh flying it too, and it's Shane Stapleton up front and Bill Sheehan as well. And they'll take on Ballyea. They'll go at them. And it'll be an interesting final. Yeah,
and Ballyea will without doubt be favourites, like 322 to 126 win over James Stephens. And the fact that they were, maybe struggling isn't the right word, but the fact that James Stephens were definitely on top, looked like they were in a winning position. But I don't think you can ever back against Ballyea getting an old scoring burst, the same way with Kilkenny there for a decade when they were winning winning All-Ireland after All-Ireland, with TJ Reid and Colin Fennelly. I mean, Colin Fennelly again comes up big. And I was thinking after the game, is Colin Fennelly the most impactful club hurler or most influential club hurler over the last couple of years? Think about the All-Ireland semi-finals that they've won, like the Schlock-Neil game a couple of years ago comes to mind. Think of the All-Ireland final against St. Thomas's where he scored something like 2-4, including that flying flick for one of the goals. Even going back to 2014, he obviously played his part. But so often, he's just coming up so big. And TJ Reid possibly is the number one in terms of influence at club level. You could make a case for Conor Callan for a couple of years as well. But by God, Colin Fennelly, he's right up there at the very, very top in terms of influence.
Yeah, I remember seeing him get 4-4 against Navan in the Leinster Club semi-final a couple of years ago as well. He's actually unstoppable at club level. He is actually he's that fast, he's that strong, he's that clinical, he's that direct. There are very few club defenders that could keep a puck into him. There are very few club defenders that would have the speed, strength and skill and experience for him. And he's one of these players. We're chatting to a fella that'd be heavily involved in Kilkenny hurling circles. He just said Like Colin Fennelly hasn't heard a bad game for Ballyhale over the last 3 years.
And you know what? Like Tommy Walsh, young Tommy Walsh of Tullaroan, actually gave an exhibition on him in the first round game. I mean, and that wasn't the Ballyhale that we're now seeing in this part of the championship. And still in all, people say, oh, Tommy Walsh hurled the ears off him or whatever. And he did to some degree, won an awful lot of ball, but Colin Fennelly still had an influence. And pretty much every day he has an influence, some days spectacularly so.
Yeah, and even like the semi-final, you could say he was well shackled on the scoreboard. This is why I always say it's so deceiving. Like when you look at a game and you look at the scores, and you might see, Colin Fennelly a goal and he was quiet. And you look at the semi-final, if you actually looked at the match, like he set up 3 goals, he gave 3 goals on plates for other lads, did all the donkey work.
And he's always winning frees as well.
Yeah, like we had a debate kind of before about. I think I said Shane O'Donnell was the most foulable forward in hurling. Well, if he is, Colin Fennelly is a very, very close second, because like defenders are so afraid when he gets the ball. Like if he gets around you, he's gone. So a lot of lads will pull him down or do whatever it is, and he'll draw fouls, he'll draw yellow cards, he'll draw goal scoring chances for other people, and he'll draw chances for himself as well. And he's like that lad at under 12 or under 14 at club level, like that could end up like in a game with like scoring 5-2 or 4-4 or 3-5, like these kind of mad scores. He doesn't really have an interest in points. If he scores points, they're usually because he was going for a goal and it went over the bar. He only seems to know one way, and that's to try and hit the onion bag. And he's been so effective over the last 3 years. TJ will take a lot of the plaudits most of the time, and probably deservedly so. But Jesus, Fennelly inside was outrageous. He was outrageous again the other day when really the Shamrocks were struggling in a lot of other positions. They definitely weren't on top in a lot of other positions, and it was really TJ and Colin Fennelly that pulled them through. Like 2-5 from Colin Fennelly. TJ, if you look at the scoreboard, you'd see he scored 1-8, 1-5 from frees, which is so deceptive because Niall Brazel was marking him, and he did a good job on him to some respects, but he hit 7 wides himself, and that just really killed the Village's momentum at times. And then TJ was catching puckouts and throwing out ball to Owen Cody and Brian Cody. They chipped in with 3 each. From a Village point of view and from Cheddar Plunkett's point of view, he must be kind of half scratching his head and wondering what do we have to do to beat them. They obviously no-showed in the county final last year, and Ballyhale ran riot. They played really, really well, and to a man, it's hard to go down through their team and see what lad came off really second best. Only 1 or 2. Tyke Dwyer was brilliant, Owen Gilfoyle brilliant up front. Keane Kenny got 3 points, Matt Rook got 3 points, and Ballyhale were still able to find a way. Like it's extraordinary, really, that like James Stevens could put up 126 against Ballyhale in 60 minutes and lose a match.
Are the Village here to stay now? I mean, Owen Larkin isn't starting at the moment. We know Jackie Tyrrell left. They probably have a decent young core to this team. And I mean, they'll probably be hoping that Ballyhale, that their run will end eventually, that Colin Fennelly, he's now over 30, that TJ Reid is heading for, I think he's heading possibly for age 32 or 33, maybe possibly even 33, yeah, that maybe their run is going to end. So are the Village here to stay?
Yeah, well, it looks like they've totally invested in youth, and when Cheddar came in, there was probably less reliance on Jackie, less reliance on Owen Larkin, and they realised that they probably needed to build a new team. The more than Ballyhale have kind of built a new team in recent years, with the likes of Cha gone and with the likes of Henry gone. And it looks like I'd say they probably are here to stay. Their age profile would definitely suggest so. Like Conor Brown, Keane Kenny, these are all young fellas. Say Matt Root is nearly the only one. I think actually I said in an early show, I think Matt Root could be 6 or 7 years older than the next oldest player on their team. So the majority of them are early 20s to mid 20s. So you imagine they are here to stay when they're putting up a performance like that and coming so close to a team, like to the best team in the country realistically.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move on to just first of all, a quick word on the county final. Dicksboro against Ballyhale. The rural against the urban. That should be a classic. But anyway, we'll jump on to the relegation playoff and preview the senior final another day. Greg Ballycallan 115, Danesford 113. That is a huge blow for Danesford. They're going back down to intermediate. For Greg Ballycallan, who've had a rough enough ride of it, and they've had injuries and so on and so forth, huge relief for them.
Massive, yeah. Like Billy Ryan was absent earlier on in a couple of the group games through injury. But I think they'd be happy enough that they had him back when they really needed him to save their bacon. He got the all-important goal, really. That was the difference between the two of them. Richie Hogan didn't start. He only came on the last 10 minutes with a hamstring injury. Like, you look at 2 points in it, you'd imagine he would have swung the balance if he'd been able to play the whole game. But such is his body kind of nowadays.
It's the Mullinavat game, isn't it? Because they were scoring so freely against Mullinavat, looked like they were going to be on the way to a quarter final, ended up losing the game in extra time. Probably Richie Hogan hasn't been right since, so it was unbelievably costly for them at that game going to extra time.
Well, if you're looking at a sliding doors moment, like if they'd gotten over Mullinavat by a point, they were in a quarter final, probably would have been beaten in a quarter final, but would have been safe. And now, from a Kilkenny point of view, with sliding doors, you have Richie Hogan coming into a championship carrying a bit of a knock, which is far from ideal given his injury history, and his club have been relegated to intermediate. And we know how competitive it is in Kilkenny. We know how hard it is to get back up when you get relegated. And it's a massive blow. Mad kind of dynamic on the sideline there as well, because Paul Carley is over Danesfort, and he was over Bray Emmets as well. So Danesfort were playing at 2:00 in John Locke Park in Callan, and Bray Emmets were playing at 5:00 in a county semi-final in Auckram. And from his point of view, like, Danesfort hurled better this year than they have in other years and still got relegated. I understand he was actually at both games and got back in time for Auckram in Auckram for Bray's warm-up, which is absolutely mad. Like, it's a mad kind of a clash. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, well, like, Bray 122, St. Pat's 113, so he got back for a victory there. But, like, what comes to mind when I think of this situation of a manager having to leave midway through the game, and that's really unfortunate. I'd say that hit him pretty hard, having to leave the game, especially when, it seemed like such a tight one, finishing 115 to 113. But it kind of brought to mind to me a story of when I was playing senior soccer, junior soccer I suppose, but soccer with Borrisalee down home in Tipperary. Can't remember who we were playing. I showed up late for the game because I was playing a video game. That was about the height of it, a soccer video game. But, like, it wasn't taken that seriously. It's one of those junior soccer things where a lot of the lads are showing up hungover. It's not taken all that seriously. But we showed up for the game, and the manager said, "You're on the bench after showing up late." And I said, "Fair enough." Sure, like, no one really cared that much. Midway through the second half, the manager, Joe Harkin, or Cody as he's known as, he says to the chairman, "Bring on Shane there in a few minutes, I have to head off." He was heading off midway through the second half. He works as a taxi man. He had a taxi run booked, so he had to head off in the second half.
That's actually fair enough. At least he wasn't heading off to play a video game, in fairness.
I came on then, and no, I didn't give an exhibition. I was terrible. But anyway, that was a busy all weekend for Paul Carley. But happy enough to get the win, I suppose, with Bray Emmets after the tough time with Danesfort. And the other semi-final, of course, Carnew Emmets, they beat Greystones from our Aero Greystones 14 points to 1-9. But while we're in Kilkenny, we'll just stick with Kilkenny for a minute. Ballyragget, they're gone down junior, intermediate All-Ireland champions just a couple of years ago, obviously up to senior level. With that, they got relegated from senior level. Now in Anne Downey's first year, and I mean, obviously this was talked about so much, first woman over a senior club team in Ireland, and ends up down in junior. So, I mean, what a disastrous season for her and for Ballyragget. I mean, in the big bad world of senior GEA, I mean, you have to kind of take the punches there. I mean, that's a very poor return when you're with a team that would be considered challengers that probably could even be winning it.
There's no point in saying any different. It's an absolute disaster for Ballyragget. A fairly kind of tumultuous last couple of years down there, but to be relegated back to junior ranks, when chatting to a lot of people down in Kilkenny, they think that Ballyragget have a consistent enough side and a consistent enough squad to be, not contenders at senior level, but to make quarterfinals at senior level. You look down through, like, Kevin Kelly started the 2016 All-Ireland final, scored a goal. I think he scored 1-1 or 1-2 in that final. You have the three Brennans, the three Stauntons, Jack Morrissey, who played an All-Ireland minor final a couple of years ago, and they're gone back down to intermediate level, the third level of hurling in Kilkenny. It's very, very hard to fathom. They were beaten in the 2018 All-Ireland intermediate final by a point by Can Turk, and went up senior the year after, and now they're back junior. It's very, very hard to believe from Ballyragget's point of view. I know, like, Anne Downey was on the toughest summer earlier on there a couple of weeks ago as well. I don't think she probably realised just how tough the summer was going to turn out to be. Like, to be relegated down to junior level is a disaster for them. On the flip side of things then, Nisha Waldron again put out a tweet about the Fenians, about JJ Delaney. Said JJ Delaney will stay going strong until he has successfully relegated every club in North Kilkenny. Like, what the Fenians have done is absolutely phenomenal. Like, we talked about the lack of underage maybe coming through, and it's a lot of the same kind of older faces that were still there even 10 or 15 years ago, and they're still clawing on, you know, in fairness to them, and it's seriously admirable. Philip Drennan had a tweet. He said, Fenians in relegation finals, name a more iconic duo.
Yeah,
I think they've won. Yeah, I think they've won 9 of the 10 relegation clashes that they've been in. The one that they lost was obviously the one they lost to go from senior to intermediate. Like, it's phenomenal. It really, really is.
Yeah, and I think it was 2 late goals that kind of turned this game. But just back to Ballyragget again, I mean, they were contenders to win this championship as far as everyone saw it. And a couple of weeks ago, like, they annihilated Callan in the, I think it was in the league, not so long ago. But since then, things have kind of gone wrong. They lost the penalties to Goran. Then there was a change in the format, and all the 4 first round losers, they went into relegation. They ended up in a semi-final against Carrick Shock, and then obviously conceded 2 late goals then the last day. I mean, if they had to get a replay against Goran, who knows what way it would have panned out. But I mean, it is what it is. It panned out the way it did, and to get relegated, geez, just that's. I mean, and this isn't to point the finger of blame at Downey in no way, shape, or form. Is it as simple as that? But it is just so disappointing and so disastrous for the team to end up with that sort of fate in her first season.
Yeah, Shane, it wouldn't matter who was managing the team, because when we see that Ballyragget have been relegated to junior, having been contesting All-Ireland intermediate finals 2 years ago, and been what should have been, you would have imagined, a solid senior team, you're going to be talking about them, because it's a massive fall from grace. There's no point in saying any different. Then just even in the Kilkenny Junior Championship, I think was interesting as well. Remember chatting to James Bergen from Connacht Shamrock. So Connacht are All-Ireland Junior champions, but didn't win the Kilkenny Junior Championship last year, but they're still in with a shout this year. So they're in the semi-finals. The reigning All-Ireland Junior champions, as I said, they're coming up, I think it's Dixborough's second team, Emeralds, Taggy Fogarty's still going strong there, and Pilltown. So we'll follow that progress fairly closely. Like, the reigning All-Ireland champions going into a Kilkenny Junior Championship. Funnily enough, the team that were touted outside of Connacht Shamrocks as the favourites for the Junior Championship were Walter Walsh's Tuller Ross Birkin, and they were knocked out at the weekend. So it just shows you how cutthroat those championships are.
And the Offaly Championship then as well. You're in the semi-final now. We obviously don't want to make too big of a deal there, but Burr are going to be against St. Ryan's, Kilcormac Callaghy against Belmont. So to run through the results at the weekend, Kilcormac saw off Sir Kieran 319 to 219. Your own Burr 319, Coolderry 11 points. So that's a fair beating. Belmont 118, Ballinamere 111, and St. Ryan's 123, 315 for Shinrone. So just in terms of Kilcormac, they got, I think it was 2-2 to 0-1 in the first 5 minutes after the water break in the second half, and they kicked on big time against Sir Kieran, who were already gone as far as I know anyway. And then in your own win, you're back from injury, so fair play to you. I believe you did pretty well too. A very convincing win over Coolderry, and I believe there was a clash between Brian Carroll and one of his own players towards the end of the game. A fair bit of a coming together as far as I know, and he ended up storming off and just walking straight out of the ground before the end of the game. So a bit of a disastrous one for Coolderry, and then as I said, Belmont and Rhinas coming through as well. So a dramatic enough weekend in Offaly all the same.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. Just from a Rhinas point of view, I believe Joseph O'Connor got straight red for them in their what was it, 2 or 3 point win over Shinrone. So I'd imagine it will be appealed, but whether he's playing or not will have a massive bearing probably on that semi-final result. And then against us, I'd say, because he's a very, very important player for them. On the other side, Belmont have been beaten a score in the semi-final, either a point or a goal, by the last 3 county champions. And they'll be really trying to make it 4-time lucky, get into a final. They're the sort of side, if they were to get to a final, they'd probably really, really fancy themselves in it. They have a lot of lads kicking football as well at the same time, but they're still going strong. So off a kind of an emerging Ballinamere side at the weekend. Two really, really interesting semi-finals in 2 weeks' time. Probably hard enough call either of them, to be honest with you, because I think all 4 sides will fancy their chances of winning it out at this stage.
And we won't press you too hard on that. That would be unfair at this juncture. We'll run into the Cork Championship from the weekend. So there was 3 quarter-finals being played. Glen Rovers are already through to the semi-finals, just the way the system works this year. So Aaron's Own saw off Sarsfields, and I think most people would have expected Sarsfields to come through there. The game was tied 9 times, but Owen Murphy, he got 10 points, 2 from play. His 10th
game. The hero once again. Yeah. Like, it's just, he's made for headlines. Hero leads Erin's on. Like, it's absolutely made for it.
But, well, no, you're thinking of Kieran Murphy. This was Owen Murphy.
Is it not Owen Murphy? Is not Owen Murphy not hero, no? For Erin's on, I think he is.
No, Kieran.
Well, maybe you're right. I thought it was Owen Murphy. Okay.
Yeah, someone will jump in there and put us right.
Well, regardless, Owen Murphy is a hero this morning in Erin's Own. That's all I will say.
We'll agree on that. So Erin's Own, they're through to semi-final against Glen Rovers, which will be tough enough going. But actually, I think everyone remembers last week, or anyone who watched the show, the Kate Devan situation where she broke her hurley, had the ball soloing along, and a mare come on at the side, threw her a proper unbroken hurley, and she had a shot. But apparently Robbie O'Flynn, he was throwing a replacement hurley from the sideline and had something similar. Robbie O'Flynn ended up with 3 points, so that's a big win for Erin's Own, who of course were winning titles I think back in 06 and 07. They might have won
just a massive one on that, Shane, as well, because someone pushed me on it last week. I put up the Cot Devan thing. I think I actually hadn't thought about it, but in camogie you're allowed to throw your hurl on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's okay for her to do that. But in hurling, if you threw your hurl on the ground and then caught a hurl, it would actually be a foul because you're dropping your hurl. So if someone threw in a hurl, no, it would technically still be a foul because hurl in your hand. So you'd have to almost catch the hurl or not have the hurl in your hand for that to be legal. You couldn't drop your hurl and then catch it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But another mad piece of skill. There was a couple of mad kind of videos. Remember our game put up the our game Twitter and Instagram had a video up yesterday of the Carnmore goalie in Galway going to the wrong goals at the start of the game. There's just it's actually great to have so many eyes and streams in all these club games, because there's things happening in club games that would never ever happen in county games. And I think you've probably been there as well. Like, sometimes the most enjoyable match to be at is like a junior match or an intermediate match where these crazy things happen and the referee does crazy things and all sorts of, like, as Father Ted used to say, we get ourselves into all sorts of crazy jams. Like, there's all sorts of mad things happening in games, and this was another one with Robbie O'Flynn. Just something that you would never see at county level. Yeah,
actually, any viewers out there, if you've seen some crazy stuff at club level, let us know. I think, was it James Scahill? It was somebody anyway, was on the radio once telling a story of when it was absolutely lashing rain in some game at, I think, possibly a lower level, and the referee just got into his car, parked up on the bank, and if he decided it was a free, he blew the horn. Then he used the indicator to let him know which way it was going. And I remember my father, the Saint, refereeing a game several years ago, and didn't really like to move out from between the 265s on his best day. But there he was, refereeing a junior hurling match with an umbrella on and a coat down past his knees, an Arsene Wenger coat, with the game going on around him. Didn't see a thing wrong with it. So let us know if you've seen anything absolutely hilarious or unusual in a club game. Please let us know, any level whatsoever. Blackrock, 18 years without a title in Cork, but they beat Douglas 122 to 20 points and they're back in the semi-finals. They're going to face UCC. But Michael O'Halloran, and people would see him, he's a serious unit, good athlete in with the Cork team, and he's had a couple of appearances for him in the last few years. He's had an ankle injury, but he started here and he got 3 points inside the first 6 minutes to give the Rockies a serious platform. He scored 7 overall. Alan Connolly came in with 1-6. On the flip side, Douglas, they've disappointed us once more. Shane Kingston, he got 10 points, 4 from play. Brian Turnbull got 5, Alan Cadigan got 3. But they've come up short yet again.
Yeah, disappointed again for Douglas. Like, I kind of thought when they got that big win over Middleton that they were going to kick on. But yeah, well, it looked like they delivered to some extent themselves, hitting 20 points. But like, Michael Halloran looks like he's in inspired form, and he was even curtailed late on with an ankle injury, but he still managed to knock over 7 from play, which is absolutely outstanding from him. But it is disappointing from Douglas. You're looking at what they have on paper and you're just thinking, this is an ideal chance for them to kick on. But they've fallen at the quarter-final stage yet again, and disappointing. Blackrock are a seasoned side now, in fairness, but like they haven't been pulling up trees for the last decade or anything. It's not as if Douglas went out to a Glen Rover side that have been winning county titles in recent years. So definitely disappointed from Douglas again. A bit, yeah. Just have to say that they're underachieving a bit for the talent that they have, really. They have forwards like that. They have an inter-county forward line in Kingston, Turnbull and Alan Cadigan, and Owen Cadigan back at the other end as well. So just a bit underwhelming from them again.
Yeah, absolutely. And UCC, they've beaten a Piercing 220 to 311. The figure that stands out here for me, Shane Conway did plenty of scoring, I believe. But Paddy O'Loughlin, he would have played the night before for Kilmallock as they lost to Down, and he's been playing in the half-hour line in every game there. And he goes and play. He was named at centre back from the match reports I've seen. So a bad weekend, I suppose he salvaged something from it.
Definitely. I'm just trying to get it up here actually now, but Eddie Brennan had a tweet. Eddie wasn't particularly happy with the fact that these lads are able to play games in the same weekend. So Eddie just said, what did he say? I actually can't find the tweet offhand here at the moment.
I think he replied to Vincent O'Toole's tweet. But yeah, if you want to talk about it there for a second, I can find it.
Yeah, he just said that's wrong in my opinion. You simply can't hurl with your home club, and then also in the Cork Championship, UCC entitled to have a team in, but players have to choose. The divisional thing and the college club thing will always be a serious point of contention. From Paddy O'Loughlin's point of view, I'm sure he was absolutely delighted to be able to get back up on the horse again and go hurling Sunday evening, and he'd probably be back training with Limerick now. I wouldn't say John Kiley will release him to be playing, club with UCC the whole time until that championship is finished. But I'm sure he's delighted to still have club interest. But it is a fairly contentious one. It's a hard one to take as well. I know Mark Coleman obviously involved as well. We'll probably talk about Blarney's heroics over the weekend in a minute too. But they have a lot of lads that are double jobbing there at the moment, and if you were from the Piercing, you'd probably feel fairly hard done by.
Yeah, you would. Yeah. Look, I don't know if I like the whole college teams being in county championships. To be honest, I'm pretty sure I don't. But one thing I was thinking about is some of these divisional teams that we see appearing in like the Kerry Championship, the Cork Championship, and so on. Do you ever think of I wonder parts of Tipperary, are there certain areas where there's hurling going on, but there aren't too many strong clubs, and there are players that might develop if there was a bigger club? Like I know there was I think it was called Thomas McDonough's team, so it was a Gaelic football team that was based in the north of Tipperary that was going for a while to try and bring together some of the good club footballers in that neck of the woods who didn't have a really serious top level club side to play with at senior level. I wondered, in counties across the board, would a few divisional sides where an area is kind of weak, would you like to see that?
Well, just say you're playing junior, right, and you have a good bit of talent, maybe haven't applied yourself that much, and just say then all of a sudden there's a divisional side within your area playing senior hurling or senior football. It mightn't, but with some lads it might change a mindset and say, geez, there's a senior hurling club here, a senior football club here, I could give this a right go. I've always talked about how good I am, but I've always been a big fish in a small pond playing junior club hurling or junior club football. I now have a chance to apply myself and see what I'm actually like at senior level. I think it would definitely have a positive spin for a couple of lads and bring a couple of lads on, and potentially unearth some county players. And when they go back and play for their club at junior or intermediate level, they should be better hurlers again. So there are positive spins to it. I think it's when a club misses out or loses out on a county title or a county final appearance because of a divisional side. I think then it becomes then the waters become a bit kind of murky.
Yeah. So the Cork Senior Hurling Championship relegation playoffs saw Bishopstown beat Ballyea 18 points to 10. Shane O'Neill and Pat Cronin out in the field in that one. And then the Premier Intermediate quarter-final thriller that I think a certain amount of people will have seen online. Blarney beat Ballincollig, but it was with 2-4 in the last 10 minutes and a goal from Patrick Pop Crowley. So I'll just quickly play that on Twitter for anyone who hasn't seen it. So I'll just bring it up here now and listen to this commentary because it's enjoyable stuff.
Ballincollig have it. No. 23 Cormac O'Mahony bats it down, good ball. Pop, you need to win it, Pop. Need to win it. Writes the challenge. Pops it over the head. Pop by name, Pop by nature. Oh, Bernie's one in. Yeah! Pop through line! Yes! We're back level in this game! Come on, Blarney!
Oh, that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, it's classic. Even the fact that your man's name is Pop. It's like Pop by name, Pop by nature. And I won't mind, there's a kind of a delayed reaction, a shot, and then all of a sudden it somehow winds up in the net. And it's definitely not a rasper of a shot because it's about 3 or 4 seconds from when he hits it to it going into the net. But it's just funny, and even we were talking about the Fenians earlier with JJ, when it gets to squeaky bum time in those games, literally anything can happen. You just, sometimes science has to go out the window near the end of games. You just get the ball into that danger zone and see what can happen.
Absolutely. The Antrim Senior Hurling Final was on the weekend. It was on TG Cahir on Sunday, and Downey beat Lochgiel 220 to 213. 7-point win, and it was pretty comfortable as the second half went on. Certainly not in the first half, because Downey only led by 1-8 to 11, or sorry, 1-8 to 10 at half time, and it was Shane McGrath's goal that kind of skipped in over the line. It was a nice little move, but it kind of just, dribbled in over the line, and then Kevin Malloy with the second goal. But Keelan Malloy, Antrim star Keelan Malloy, he really is a top player, isn't he?
Yeah, I saw him hitting 5 points. He's a lovely left-hander. He's hit 5 points against Offaly in the Kyo Cup final earlier on this year in Navan. And he scored a point yesterday off the wrong side, kind of, for that type of a player. Real nonchalant kind of an effort. Beautiful point. He's a lovely player. I love that left-handed style player anyway, and he's got a ball of pace, loads of skill. He was kind of the difference yesterday. Samuel McNaughton said it was kind of old money against new money, and the new money just had a bit more energy, a bit more kind of legs, and Lochgiel still had plenty of nous, all that kind of experience that brought them to All-Ireland in 2012, but Downey looked like they're just a small bit ahead at the moment. Obviously had Cushendall and Rossa and a couple others probably not too far behind, but Downey have kind of really kicked on. Colin Cunning was kind of butchered a goal chance for Lochgiel with the...
it was actually on the counter-attack. Colin Cunning scored a great point for Downey after Lochgiel had butchered a goal chance. I mean, I can't remember the names of the players, but there was a guy through on goals. He got himself blocked down when he had one of his teammates free outside him, and it was a guaranteed goal straight up the other end. Cunning throws it over, and that kind of helped Downey to kick on. And I have to say
that's
as well,
the sort of thing lads don't forget about either. Like, that's the sort of thing that leaves a really bad taste, particularly if it should have been a slip ball inside and goes up the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul Shields, Shorty as is known, he was kind of playing. Well, he was wearing number 8 for Downey. He was sitting behind the midfield. He's one of these lads who, he's been playing this role for years, where he's just sweeping up from the base of midfield, and he was just on the ball constantly. And he'd been coming into it with a hamstring injury, and you could see he had that kinesiology, selling your magic beans tape on his hamstrings. I don't know how much that stuff actually does, but he was brilliant and controlled the game for long spells. And a word for Liam Watson, who seems to have retired after that game at 38 years of age.
Yeah, it looks like he has. He just put out a tweet there this morning, in fairness, fairly magnanimous in defeat. He just said, well, congratulations, Downey, better team on the day. I would just like to thank everyone who's helped me play and learn the game. To all my teammates, I love yous all. I had a smile on my face all day. You can't win them all. Over and out. Take care. # all on the pitch. So that he might be, the motocross journey might be finally beginning now for Liam Watson. But if that is the last act on his career, he'll never be forgotten for that 2012 All-Ireland Club win when he hit 3-7. Absolutely outstanding player.
Yeah, and for anyone who missed the preview show we did last week, he was taking up motocross, and then obviously the off-season happened and the motocross didn't really, but he kept himself in shape through that pursuit, and that's why he made the comeback. And he only played he'd gotten injured, and he played the semi-final, scored 1-3, played the final there on Sunday, and buried in a 21-yard free late on to help Lochgiel make a bit of a burst of it, but to be honest, the game was kind of over at that stage anyway. The Armagh Championship semi-finals were on at the weekend. Middletown na Fianna, they beat Derry Noose 3-19 to 2-12, and Cuchulainn saw off Sean Tracy's 2-20 to 2-6. So Middletown, they've won 6 of the last 9 Armagh titles. Then the Derry final was on at the weekend. Schlockneil, now you're wearing the Derry jersey there from orgaretro.com, but Schlockneil, they've completed an 8 in a row after beating Kevin Lynch's by 23 points to 11. Jeffrey McGonigal, of course, the dual star for Derry over the years, he's over Kevin Lynch's. They started really well, and with the wind they were 6 points to 2 up, but they had too many wides, and then ultimately Schlockneil came back, and Cormac O'Doherty, I should say, with 12 points, Brendan Rodgers with 3, and they obviously kicked on. And Schlockneil, they're just going to be disgusted that they don't have a provincial championship and Downey waiting for them.
Yeah, they would have loved the crack at Downey, and as you said, Schlockneil won't rest until they've at least been in another or an All-Ireland Club final. They haven't been in an All-Ireland Club final. They won't rest until they get.
Well, they have in football, but yeah, not in hurling. Yeah,
All-Ireland Club hurling final. They've been around the semi-final stages, and obviously pushed Ballyea to a good game last year and give yourselves a decent game a couple of years ago for a while. But they won't rest until they've at least gotten to Croke Park and played an All-Ireland hurling final. Really, really polished performance again. Like 8 in a row, as I said. There's so many variables come into, like, people look at the Shockneil team and think, oh yeah, they should be winning every year, but it's not as simple as that. You pick up knocks along the way, lads lose motivation, lads fall out with each other possibly, and you know, the hunger isn't there. The same hunger is obviously still there. I think when you look down through the spread of scores, they'd seven or eight scores, and Conor O'Doherty, Brendan Rodgers kind of shooting the lights out again. From a Kevin Lynch's point of view, having been 6 points to 2 up, they really, really faded out of the game, and Shockneil just took over completely. Jeffrey McGonigal, who would have been one of those kind of cult childhood heroes growing up. I remember him playing for Derry against Offaly in 2000 All-Ireland quarter-final up in Croke Park when he pushed us close. He's just one of these kind of legendary kind of figures, but even his kind of words of wisdom couldn't do it for Kevin Lynch's. A fairly hefty defeat in the wind up 12 points. Like, they'll be going heading into the winter now fairly demoralised after that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Galway Senior Hurling Championship relegation playoff, Baha beat Kinvara 3-13 to 1-13. So that's Conor Whelan, Colin Callan and Shane Kavanagh, all Galway stars over the years, relegated. They'd actually won intermediate last year and got to a final in Connacht against Turin, which they actually lost. So that's a disappointing first season back at senior for them. The Laois Championship over the weekend, Camross beat Ballinakill 216 to 17 points. Downey Earl, they beat Abbey Leaks with a nice bit to spare, 225 to 17. Clock Ballycollah battered Castletown 426 to 11. And Rose Nallis, the shock specialist, they beat Burrs Kilcotton 212 to 113. So that's knocking Camross and now Burrs Kilcotton out. Semi-final draw is going to be Downey Earl against Burrs Kilcotton, Rose Nallis against Clock Ballycollah. Sorry, they obviously haven't knocked out both of them, but they beat Burrs Kilcotton to seal top spot. So that's great stuff from Rose Nallis. Not a bad year to transfer back for John O'Loughlin.
No, in fairness, and he actually never played with Rosenallis. He would have played with Mount Mellick growing up, but Rosenallis was his father's club.
Oh, okay.
So I always felt like he wanted to give something back to them, so he transferred back this year. And like, to have a player like that coming back, who's had, you know, all that inter-county kind of work done over the last 10 years, albeit at football, he would have hurled a good bit with UCD down through the years, would have hurled with Bridget's as well. There's actually an Offaly man over them, Brian Troy from Luscombe, I believe, is over Rosenallis. No one would have expected. I think they were 4-1, 5-1 in the two games. Those two games that they won, they put Camross into a relegation semi-final. Camross beat Ballinakill. Chatting to a Camross man there this morning, he was happy that they're just out of that kind of quagmire. And once the championship was over for them, he was just happy that they weren't going to be in a relegation final, nothing like that. So Chad Dwyer is going to be under pressure to try and keep Ballinakill up now. I think Mark Cavan actually picked up a serious enough injury in Downey's win over Abbey Leaks, and I know he's not that long back from I think he had a medial knee ligament, and I think he had a bit of surgery done. I remember chatting to Eddie Brennan at the turn of the year, and I believe he picked up a serious enough injury yesterday. So there'll be some worry there about whether he's going to be fit for county semi-finals and whether he's going to be fit for Laois as well. Massive score up by Clock Ballycollah, you probably would be expecting that. But the semi-finals are going to be interesting. Rose and Alice definitely wouldn't have been expected to be there. I did my kind of power rankings, or the 4 top teams in Laois, and Camross were definitely probably either 1 or 2 in Laois and now aren't in the semi-finals. Rose and Alice will fancy themselves now coming into that. They've beaten 2 of the big guns so far, and on the other side then you have Downey and Burrs Kilcotton, which would be, I was actually at a county final maybe 3 or 4 years ago when Ken Hogan was over. Burrs Kilcotton, one of the best club games I was ever at. So that'll be probably another high scoring affair there. But yeah, definitely interesting semi-finals.
Yeah, I mean, it's real squeaky bum time for inter-county managers at the moment. Eddie Brennan, you're talking about an injury there. Eddie Brennan is going to be sweating on this Laois Championship because it's ending, I suppose, later than pretty much, I would say, most of the other championships in Leinster. I mean, Wexford, they've been done for a couple of weeks at this stage. So Davy Fitz, he'll have all his players back now. He'll be getting them all fresh and right and building up for that Galway clash in the Leinster semi-final.
Just on that, Shane, actually an interesting one. The Wexford Guardian, or Enniscorthy Guardian, did a piece there a couple of weeks ago. Because people would have talked about the Wexford Hurling Championship being on first and the benefit that has to Davy Fitz. They did a fairly exhausted all the players within the Wexford panel and basically analysing whether they're playing football. And of the 31 available players that were free from injury, 28 of them are playing club football and playing it regularly. So I don't think it's as clear cut as Davy having all his panel back in tow. Today, actually, they're all back allowed training. They're training from tonight onwards. It would be interesting if you could fly around the country and just see what's going on in different places, what the numbers are like. I know there was some counties probably training in smaller numbers up until this, but just on the Wexford thing, I don't think it's as clear cut as you're saying there. Just to be fair to lads that are playing club football as well as club hurling, but I think it's going to get really interesting now, because this is the first time where there's a real crossover between club and county.
But I don't think it's as simple as saying that either, because you're going to have a lot of clubs that are already knocked out of Wexford or knocked out very, very soon. Whereas for Eddie Brennan, he's looking at his players and knowing, I'm probably not going to see the vast majority of them for a few weeks yet. And also, if Laois are going to see their panel later and go in against Dublin, like the Dublin final is on next weekend, you know, Eddie Brennan has a few more weeks to worry about injuries coming in, like we were talking about here. Whereas Matty Kenny knows once next weekend passes, he knows that at least the players, if anything's going to happen, he at least has some level of control, because it's going to be in their environment.
No, it's a fair point. And when you look at that semi-final draw in Laois, you're thinking, I'd hazard a guess and say there's more than half of Eddie's squad involved in that semi-final. I'd say at least.
With skin and hair flying.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So, yeah, no, that's a fair point, in fairness. But it's going to get really, really interesting now. I'd like to be privy to the conversations that are going on between county and club managers, between club players that are still involved with their club and some county managers, because the itch that they've had for the last couple of months, as it rises to the surface today, and things kind of get real today now. They're allowed officially back training, so it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen there.
In the London Championship, round 1, Brother Pierce's they beat St Gabriel's 4-12 to 117. Robert Emmets put up a big score of 228 against Father Murphy's 3-11. Mayo Championship, Keith Higgins is the man by all accounts. So Ballyea they beat Turin here 115 to 112. That's a first Mayo title since 2016. And the 4-star All-Star himself, he hit 9 points. Damien Keaton, he was man of the match, and Jason Coynes hit 1-1. But that's 13 county hurling titles for Keith Higgins, so, which is, I think, basically every one that they've ever won it, he's always been involved with it. That is incredible stuff.
Yeah, that's outrageous when you put it like that. Like 13 county titles, I take your arm off for one more county title, let alone to have 13. That's savage, in fairness. It's not just lip service. Like I've seen Keith Higgins hurl a couple of times, and I remember actually playing with the Offaly under-21s. We played Mayo many moons ago, the Mayo seniors, and we're not just paying lip service but saying, oh, he's a great hurler. He's a brilliant hurler, and if he'd been so concentrating solely on hurling, maybe in a more a stronger hurling county, he would not saying he'd be a household name, but he would be probably a regular on a lot of county teams if he just focuses his attention on that. He hasn't, but it's great that he can go back and know that he's going to be in the top 2 or top 3 in Mayo every year and put his attention into that. A big win, obviously a massive rivalry between these two. Turin were Connacht champions last year at intermediate level. So it's a massive, massive win for Ballyea.
Yeah, it's been a great run for Turin. The Blue Devils, as they're known as, so they had won 3 in a row, and like you said, that Connacht title as well. To beat Kinvara, you know, at league that time, I think one of those grounds that's just surrounded by trees, meant to be a great environment there, a great atmosphere. So congrats to Ballyea there. In Meath, the quarter-final in Fenians, they beat Longwood 313 to 11. Kildalkey beat Kilmessan 318 to 112. Then a relegation playoff, Blackhall, Gale, Soft, Navan O'Mahony's 13 points to 12. In Monaghan, Castleblaney, they beat Trua with a fair bit to spare. That's a 4 in a row. They were 16 points ahead at half time, like 2-12 to 2 points. So it was pretty much all done at that stage. Declan Crowe, he was man of the match for Castleblaney. Then in Roscommon, Athleague beat 4 Roads by 5 points. Park Pierce's just off Tremaine, 19 points to 2-12. Sligo semis, Nave Owen beat Coolers Strand Hill, and Eastquay, they beat Western Gales 417 to 7. So that's a repeat of last year's final, which Nave Owen won by 3. Tip relegation playoff, Aero and Carty Donahill beat Burgess 117 to 16 points. And Aero, they would be regularly getting pretty deep in the senior championship, so probably would have been a bit of a shock if they had to go down. And then the Tyrone final, I'll let you take the Tyrone final just to finish up.
Yeah, no, Owen Rua Dungannon were going for 3 in a row. That bid was ended. They were beaten by 5 points by Aero yesterday. Aero had lost the last 2 finals. I think they contested the last 9 between the two of them. Sean O'Grogan and Cormac Monroe with the goals. I know a few boys up in Dungannon, they'll be fairly sick, I'd say, this morning, with all celebrations in Aero. it's just amazing even going down through the list of games. So amount of like really like big final games, semi-finals, relegation finals. The season's going to be over for a lot of club players now. But there'll be a lot of people smiling this morning too.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant stuff over the weekend. So that's it from Club Talk Hurling, brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the reference code 15% off if you want to get reference code ORGABE to get 15% off jerseys like this Clare one and the Derry one that Michael Verney has there. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane. Good man.